There are three different types of games in Dota 2, and by extension, there are three types of players. The three game types are free wins, free losses, and games that you can actually impact. In my personal experience, about 40% of games are unwinnable, as if some brilliant scientist discovered a way to go back in time only so they could grab 4 Cro-Magnons and employ them to snipe 40% of your Dota games as your teammates. Another 40% you couldn't possibly throw even if you tried, they're just so easy. And the remaining 20% are the games where your impact actually determines whether or not you win or lose. After reviewing probably close to 1,000 replays in both private coaching and Dota Alchemy replay reviews, I can confidently say that the vast majority of Dota players, individually speaking, are hyper-focused on one of these three types of games. Some people are obsessed with these free wins, which are bound to happen in about 40% of matches, and they submit them week after week to replay review, usually to no avail. I have to say, I can actually understand this. It's a nice rush of dopamine to have a good game of Dota 2. It's borderline euphoric, especially after painstakingly working your ass off to improve at the game. On top of that, looking at losses can be tremendously painful. To look at losses, you have to be vulnerable. You have to admit that you suck and that there's a lot to improve on. Every mistake you see in a losing replay is extra hours of work that you have to do if you care about getting better. So, to some degree, ignorance is bliss when it comes to only caring about winning replays. But looking at wins is just not productive. But why is this the case? Because Dota 2 is incredibly snowbally. A single mistake can make a game unrecoverable if the enemy team plays their cards even half decently. So, with that being said, unless you're Miracle, wins are typically riddled with tons of little mistakes and a few big mistakes. But in these games, it's impossible to distinguish the important mistakes from the unimportant ones because there is no clear turning point in the game, since you won. Looking at wins to improve is truly like trying to find a needle in a haystack. It's, of course, possible, but incredibly hard, and usually turns out to be a waste of time. So, my advice for you when you find yourself in one of these free games, try to not let these games morph your confidence into ego. Do not let these games take you out of a productive mind state, or you will very quickly find yourself plateauing in MMR. Another 40% of games are guaranteed losses, and these are the games that the majority of people seem to be obsessed with. This group, week after week, submits borderline impossible to win games to replay review and coaching sessions. You might be surprised to hear that I actually find that a minority of these players care about these games because they're blaming their teammates to excuse their own shitty gameplay. Ask me a year ago, I would have told you quite the opposite. I was convinced people were just shitty at Dota and looking for any old excuse for their own shitty play. But since then, I've talked to so many different Dota players in replay review and coaching, and what I've learned is that, of course, there are a few bad apples that spoil the bunch, but a lot of people focus on these games for far less sinister reasons. Usually, it's, in a sense, a morbid curiosity of wondering if there's something that they could have actually done to win these games. In other words, people really do want to learn, but the pain and mystery of these seemingly impossible games draws them in. But I'm here to tell you, no, there is jack shit that you could have done in these games. Stop caring about them. It is a waste of time. My best advice, which I cannot stress how genuinely important I think it is do not let these horrible games tilt you in your future games. If you find yourself in a game that seems like it's a guaranteed loss, do not gaze into the abyss of tilting and blaming teammates. Since these games are so damn common, you need to develop a method to mentally check out of these games. Of course, I am not advocating that you throw. I am not advocating that you stop trying to win. But have fun with the little things in Dota. battle for bounty runes, kill jungle creeps, whatever it is that you can treat like a little mini game that you can enjoy, do anything to take your mind off the torture of losing horribly. The best thing about this is that a lot of the time the enemy team might actually throw, and you'll get a free win, as long as you don't tilt. The closest real-life analogy to these loss and win obsessors that I can think of is people who are morbidly obsessed with death. The rabbit hole of being obsessed with death is definitely something that could improve your life in some respects, because it might make you live like every day is your last and you might become extremely productive, but naturally, this line of thinking, of course, can also cripple you. Both of these groups of players in Dota 2, the loss obsessors and the win obsessors, are similar to these real-life death obsessors. Just like death is a very real thing and your concerns about it are perfectly valid and true, it doesn't make it productive to obsess over. Similarly, obsessing over free wins and free losses is a waste of time, regardless of you being right about how shit your teammates were in the losing games or how sick your plays were in the winning games. So finally, we get to the 20% of games that truly matter. The games where your impact will determine whether you win or lose. These games are the games where you want to put your best foot forward, because, of course, your impact is the determining factor. You may be wondering, but Jenkins, how in God's name do I identify if I'm in one of these games? And my only answer is, you don't. It's nearly impossible. And this, my friends, is why your focus in all of your games should be on having the highest impact possible rather than winning the game. Why? Because this is a three-pronged solution. It solves a separate problem no matter what type of game you're in. If you're in a guaranteed loss, then focusing on having the highest impact will be a fun mini-game to distract you from tilt. If you're in a guaranteed win, then focusing on having the highest impact possible will allow you to be critical of yourself, even though it's a win, avoiding the problem of developing an ego. If you're in a game where the win is determined by your impact, then you'll have the highest impact possible, and therefore you'll win the game. In each case, you have a best case scenario outcome. The analogy that I love to use to explain this, and this will be the final analogy of the video, is that Dota 2 matchmaking is like poker. You can have an amazing strategy, let's say it's so good that hypothetically you have a 90% chance to win. Of course, you can still lose, but over time, you're basically guaranteed to get rich. Does ability to lose take away from the strategy? No, God, of course not. That's just the nature of playing a semi-luck based game. All you need to do is play more, and statistically speaking, you'll eventually start winning. It may not feel that way, but Dota is the same. Your focus should be only on making your strategy good, and yes, sometimes you might get a useless idiot teammate, like in poker you might be dealt terrible cards, but if you keep playing and your strategy remains solid, you'll eventually get rich in Dota as well. But instead of money, you'll be rich in MMR.